T25 and the CRA. There is CRA fraud to the tune of $500 million, and we'll find out about that in the show today. It's unbelievable, really, that fraudsters are targeting our tax collection, stealing people's identities, and stealing $500 million. And that's a minor story, kind of a footnote on a Friday. Yeah, weird. Rutte, remember Rutte from the Netherlands, who got the farmers to chase him out of the leader of the Netherlands? I think it was Netherlands. And now he's the NATO leader, I believe, or is he the United Nations leader? One of those. He's the United Nations, not NATO. And he was hanging out with Donald Trump while Donald Trump was talking Greenland. So we'll watch that because that's interesting. They both talk about how great it would be for the United States to be in charge of Greenland. So interesting, right? Rutte is on board. What does that say? North American bloc incoming. Dave Eby uses Trump to become Darth Sidious. So Dave Eby is using the threat of Trump's tariffs to pass a legislation that gives him sweeping new powers until, 2.5, 3 years from now. So, and that's all because Donald Trump might tariff Canada. Very interesting stuff happening there. PBO analysis update. So the other day there was a report talking about how in order to achieve net zero, we would have to reduce the oil and gas cap would need to reduce production of oil and gas, and that would lose 40,000 jobs. And apparently the PBO says, hold on, they're making things up. They're assessing things that don't actually exist. And I don't know about that. I don't know. I think that the assessment is correct. And now that they've been found out about what they want to do and people don't like it, they're trying to walk it back. But that's just speculation. Carney is going to be sworn in today, says the rumors. I think so. There were cabinet positions being leaked out yesterday. I heard a rumor that Omar Al-Ghabra is the deputy prime minister, but I don't think so. He didn't tweet anything about that, or there's no posts on X about anything like that. So that could just be a terrible, awful rumor. But he did just secure $84 million for the people who butchered Christians in Syria. So, just as bad, probably just as bad. 51st state is again in full swing. Donald Trump is talking about how, we're going to have to do this. I know it's going to be bumpy, but we're going to have to do this for sure. And so that's interesting to watch. Tariffs and canola oil. Tariffs and canola oil is the biggest story you have not heard of. And I think it's seriously being underreported. And I'm sorry if my microphone's too loud. It looks like it's too loud, but now it's probably too quiet. So I'm gonna change it to. I have to adjust it, but I'm doing this live because I'm live streaming this morning. So that's where I usually have it at, and it looks pretty normal. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, canola oil and tariffs. What's happening there? Because aren't the biggest tariffs in Canada right now Donald Trump's fault? Mean man, orange man bad, right? No, absolutely not. It's the canola oil tariffs that are going to be the most impactful. And hearing Scott Moe talk about this, you can hear the frustration, and I don't want to say desperation, but there's a note in his voice. You can hear it. We'll get there in just a second. First, Alex preps us with, he says Canada's canola oil industry is $43.7 billion with a B dollars and 206,000 jobs. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of people, right? The Canadian steel industry is $6.7 billion and 123,000 jobs. So that's a big deal. Okay, the steel tariffs are a big deal. Yes, 100% tariffs on canola oil is going to be a bigger deal, and Saskatchewan is going to take the hit. And that's concerning to Scott Moe bigly, right? Slaughtering an independent and thriving industry in the hopes of protecting an unknown industry, that's a bad idea. The Canadian EV industry doesn't have actually any kind of money attached to it at this point, only government subsidy, right? So we're going to kill the canola industry in order to shore up the EV industry, right, Mr. Champagne? Here he is talking about this now. He says we're going to protect our industry. Note as well, when Canada does tariffs, they're good. They're beneficial. They're good. There is no downside to the tariffs. When the United States does tariffs against Canada, they are terrible and bad and awful. And Donald Trump is the worst person in the world. And have you heard how terrible he is? And that Elon guy too. Here we go.
I want to ask finally about actually other tariffs that are being levied on Canadian agriculture products in this products in this sense. Over the weekend, China said that it would impose counter tariffs to the EV ones that we put on back in the summer. Is your government thinking about considering removing any tariffs on China? Any of those EV tariffs, for example?
We're not.
You will not.
We're not.
Even given the issues with the United States right now, there's no second guessing our posture towards trade with China at this moment?
Well, I would say not with respect to the tariffs that we put, because there was a good reasons. We would say we would never be a backdoor to cheap Chinese vehicle, which are overly subsidized and where they don't respect labor law and environmental laws. I mean, there's a reasons why they're dumping steel in North America, and you see these cheap vehicles coming here. We want to protect our industry. We want to protect our workers. We want to protect our communities. And the reasons why we imposed the tariff in the first place still remain very valid today, because we want to protect our industry. And the problem.
So no big opening to China at this moment, like one premier has essentially called for a rethink of that.
I would say, with respect to the tariffs we put, there was a very, very specific reason. Okay. And I think people understood that well. And the last thing you would want is my point is, it's a bigger thing. If you look at the forest as opposed to the tree, you said, let's establish rules. If everyone respects the rules, I know we win. The problem now is that on this case, you have China who does not respect the rules, and therefore they're dumping products here, and cheap products, and therefore that would be hurting our Canadian economy and industry. So we're going to stand strong, we're going to stand firm, we're going to fight for Canadian interests, and honestly our mission is to, like I said, we cannot allow uncertainty to become the new certainty in North America, because it goes to undermine our competitiveness in North America, and that's going to affect our national security over the long term. And I think
the carbon tax undermines our competitiveness. The carbon tax hamstrings us. It cuts us off at the knee. Like, run a marathon, but cut off one leg at the knee and see how well you do. Like, it's not going to work well. We're doing that with the carbon tax. Further, the reason that we put the Chinese tariffs on the Chinese EVs is because the United States pressured us to, and implied heavily that if we didn't do it, there would be consequences. And so I understand what he's saying. I still don't think it's a good idea, and probably there needs to be some kind of discussion to fix this, because listen to Scott Moe. Here's what he had to say about the whole situation. And let me know in the comments if you hear what I hear in his voice.
Can you elaborate on what you said yesterday? You said in the next, if the Chinese tariffs go through in a week, that it would decimate the canola industry in Saskatchewan. Can you elaborate on that statement?
Yeah, it'll close crushing plants. I can't be more clear. And the people that will be working in those plants will not have a job for a period of time. More impactful than that. And I would really hope that anyone that is running for the Liberal Party of Canada, or any party in the next election, listens to these next words. More impactful than a temporary loss of jobs in the canola crush industry is the markets that we are losing. The markets that we are losing are going to be they were incredibly hard to build in the first place, and they're going to be incredibly hard to regain. And so I don't know that those jobs will immediately come back. This is the reason that I ask Prime Minister-designate Carney to reach out, make his first engagement with the government of China to find a way through these very, very disastrous counter tariffs that have been implemented that are going to have an impact on Western Canadian families.
He sounds, again, it's not quite there, but he sounds like he wants to make people understand how big this is going to be, and they don't get it, and nobody really gets it. And it seems like there's not going to be a response until a disaster happens with regards to job loss, or with regards to contracts lost, crushing plants closed, so on and so forth. It's not like the suppliers, the people who are purchasing the product don't need it anymore. They just won't get it from Canada because of the Chinese tariffs. And so if we could fix that and avoid that disaster, then no crushing plants need to close, and the crop can go ahead as normal, and so on and so forth. So it seems like they're willing to scramble and do what it takes to counter Trump, but not do anything at all, not even lift a pinky finger to help the West with regards to Chinese tariffs, etc. And that's telling. It's very, very telling, because that's what our government is comfortable with, what they want to do, how they want to whip up the Canadian public against one boogeyman and ignore another more impactful one. Here's Trump talking, moving on from the Saskatchewan canola. Here's Trump talking about Greenland, and he says, "Yeah, I think Greenland is going to happen. I think it's going to happen." And here you go. And then he turns to Mark Rutte and says, "What do you think, Mark? You think this is a good idea? Let's do this." And Mark Rutte says, "Yeah, great idea. North American bloc incoming. Here we go."
What is your vision for the potential annexation of Greenland and getting the potential?
Yeah. Well, I think it'll happen, and I'm just thinking, I didn't give it much thought before, but I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international. We have a lot of our favorite players cruising around the coast, and we have to be careful. And we'll be talking to you. It's a very appropriate, really a very appropriate question.
There's an issue in the high north, so the Arctic. So what you did, so when it comes to Greenland, yes or not joining the US, I would leave that outside for me, this discussion, because I don't want to drag NATO in that. But when it comes to the high north and the Arctic, you are totally right. The Chinese are now using these routes. We know that the Russians are rearming. We know we have a lack of icebreakers. So the fact that the outside Russia, there are 7 Arctic countries working together on this under US leadership is very important to make sure that that region, that part of the world stays safe. And we know things are changing there, and we have to be there.
So there you go. We have to be there, he says. We'll use the United States wherever they're willing to put military power, I guess, says Rutte. And here is...
Take a look at
Here's again President Trump is exposing the fact that Biden signed everything by autopen a few moments ago. This is just an interesting clip. You know what? It maybe belongs a little bit later, but it goes to how corrupt our leadership and all the rest of it is. And we're going to talk further about the annexation of Canada in the next series of clips. So just talking about who was in charge, who was making these decisions, because it doesn't seem like it was the elected president of the United States. It seems like it's been done through committee and auto pen signature, and Trump's laying that bare. And if they've only done this with Biden, is that plausible? Do you think that they've only done this kind of treason with just Biden, or do you think that this auto pen trick has been used historically as well? And I mean, how long has the autopen been in existence, right? It was the 60s or something like that when it came into existence. I watched a clip where they had the president signing something via remotely or something like that. And then also the autopen's existence was kind of a footnote in that. Anyway, regardless, it's one of those things that makes me think, what are the implications of this? If this is known, what unknowns does this, if they're doing this with Biden, how deep does this go? It's fundamentally where my brain goes. Here's Trump.
Signs by autopen. Who was signing all this stuff by autopen? Who would think you signed important documents by autopen? These are major documents you're signing. You're proud to sign them. You have your signature on something. In 300 years, they say, oh, look, can you imagine? Everything was signed by autopen, almost everything. Nobody's ever heard of such a thing. So should have never happened. This was a fluke.
Should have never happened. War would never have happened, he says. Carrying on, Dave Eby of BC, moving into, this is Trump threatening tariffs, Trump threatening annexation of Canada. The tariffs are the excuse for Dave Eby's power grab. And so he uses the excuse of Trump to claim total power, right? And no oversight in this very, very, very thin minority government, right? Thin majority. He's got a majority, but it's a very thin majority, right? So very, very concerning. One person flips on him and he can't pass anything. So he says, just in case I can't pass anything and I'm hamstrung by this very, very thin majority I've got, we've got to pass this bill, right? Unbelievable stuff. Rob says Dave Eby admits new bill that gives cabinet sweeping emergency powers that bypass the legislature for 2 years, gives him unique and unusual authority with the justification that he has to respond to Donald Trump in real time. No, you don't understand. I know exactly what to do, and no oversight is necessary. Thank you. Bruce, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry, Banman, says power-hungry Eby is about to try to force the most drastic, undemocratic powers this province has ever seen, using the threat of tariffs as a reason. Bill 7 should send a shiver down our spines, right? And here's the article about Bill 7, just to give us some more kind of meat on this. Vancouver Sun is reporting NDP power grab law is the most far-reaching since the War Measures Act, which is not great, right? Premier Eby's responded to the Trump tariff threat Thursday with legislation to allow the NDP cabinet to override all provincial laws, regulations, authorities, and even the legislature itself. In extraordinary times, we need extraordinary powers, Eby told. Second comic book reference of the morning. Eby told reporters, referring to Bill 7, the Economic Stabilization and Tariff Response Act. He's right about the powers in the bill being extraordinary. In 41 years of covering BC governments, I've not seen a legislation as arbitrary and far-reaching this side of the Federal War Measures Act. It would give the NDP cabinet the power to make regulations broadly supporting the economy of BC and Canada, which might well cover darn near anything that pops into the mind of Eby or his ministers. It also allows for regulations supporting all manner of measures to reduce trade barriers within Canada. Cabinet ministers can request regulatory authorities to amend their regulations in line with the new objectives. Authorities that fail to do so within 60 days will be forced to comply. Other provisions would allow the cabinet to backdate orders to January 20th of this year, when Donald Trump took office. And there's an open-ended clause that would allow the cabinet to make regulations respecting the collection or disclosure of information, including personal information, for the purposes of this act. The cabinet is further empowered to sign orders addressing challenges or even anticipated challenges arising from the action of a foreign jurisdiction. Anticipated by who? EB was asked at one point. He referred to the question to the Attorney General, and it was answered, quote, "When we design the guardrails of the use of that power, we are looking at it in terms of anticipating and what circumstances it would be used in reality, unpredictable circumstances," she said. So it gives us that scope and the ability to step in extraordinary times. We needed these extraordinary powers. So we needed to preemptively give ourselves extraordinary powers just in case. Trust us. We're experts. Okay. Nope. In other words, EB, Sharma, and their colleagues will use these powers as they see fit. As for the alleged guardrails, the legislation includes a half a dozen or so override clauses. Each addresses potential clashes between cabinet orders issued under the Act and existing laws, regulations, authorities, directives, requirements, guidelines, programs, policies, administrative practices, or any other procedure. Each says much the same thing. In the event of the clash, so if a law clashes with the new order wins, okay? In the event of a clash, the newly drafted cabinet order will prevail over the existing law, regulation, policy, or anything else. So that's pretty crazy too, right? So we definitely need a dictatorship, and I need to rule it, says EB. The only limitation, Trump thinks he's a dictator. Hold my beer, says EB. Like, what is going on? The only limitation on cabinet's power are regarding the legislative obligation to consult and accommodate the interests of Indigenous people, which cannot be overridden. How easy is it to get somebody to sign off on that? Like, I'm sure he's not bringing that to the electorate of Indigenous people. I'm sure that he's going to have a token somebody sign off on this thing. Love to be proven wrong. Send me who the people that he's consulting with is or are. I would love to see it. I'll report on it, please. He continues, nor can the cabinet waive the requirement to, quote, obtain a license, permit, or other authorization for, or the assessment or consideration of the environment effects of a project relating to a natural resource. So they can pay off the climate bribes that they need to pay off. Okay. I was tempted to write, says the author, that the new legislation will allow the NDP cabinet to trump most existing laws and regulations. Ha ha ha. For in confronting Trump's arbitrary exercise of power, EB would give his own cabinet an unprecedented amount of legislative and regulative leeway. EB and Sharma also referred to the legislation as time limited, but not all that much. It will be in effect until May 28th, 2027, well into the third year of Dave Eby's 4-year term. Once the New Democrats use their legislative majority to enact the legislation this spring, they will have they will not have to further consult the legislature after that. EB at one point claimed that the cabinet orders issued under this act will be subject to ratification by the House, but ratification is not explicitly spelled out in any provision I could see. So that's, all very, very interesting. Here's Brett. He says, holy cow, in true communist style, BC Premier EB says that since he can't predict what Trump will do, he has to give himself more power. So here we go.
I wish I could say we could predict what the president is going to do next, but I don't think anyone can predict that. I'm not even sure the president can predict what he's going to do next. And so we need to have the tools in place to be able to respond quickly. This is a significant piece of legislation in that it gives regulation making authority to government that does not require it to go through the legislature immediately. And so given the unique nature of these powers, it's important that there are checks and balances in place, and I'm going to ask the Attorney General to walk you through what those are.
Yeah, I don't think it's good enough. We're going to usurp the legislature because there's an emergency, and the legislature can't respond to that emergency. Only I can respond to that emergency. Here's my Attorney General to tell you what limits I have on that. Inform them, Karen, right? Or whoever it is. Jared says Premier EB on removing Tesla products from PC. So yes, and right after giving himself unlimited power, he attacks Elon Musk and Tesla. Listen to this. Listen to his words. They're important. Here we go.
Yeah, Tesla cars are too expensive to qualify for the Clean BC Auto program, but they also produce a product called a Powerwall, which is like a battery for your home, as well as chargers and accessories that qualified for Clean BC subsidies and programming, up to $10,000 in subsidy. I think that if British Columbians heard that $10,000 of taxpayer money was going to Elon Musk, they'd want to throw up. So we removed them from the program.
If you questioned whether your government was captured, the answer is yes. And it's way worse than you think. Way, way, way. If only you knew how bad it really was, honestly. Bruce Party is responding to this. Mark is saying, Bill 7 contains the broadest Henry VIII clause I've seen in some time. These extraordinary clauses allow Cabinet to amend a primary law via regulation. This bill is even broader. It permits Cabinet to amend almost any primary law. I see no justification for this. They're saying Trump's bad and mean and he's so scary. We need powers. We need powers to protect you from Trump. And us as Canadian citizens are supposed to say, okay, we'll close our eyes and trust you. And not in the last 5 years, not in the last 10 years have I seen any government do beneficial things for their citizens. Everything they've done has been giveaways to money laundering operations like foreign wars, UNRWA, Ukraine, so on and so forth. Global Affairs Canada, the list goes on. And we're just supposed to close our eyes and trust them? Like, lay back, it's all been done before, right? Bruce Party says a flaw in our system of government. If legislatures are supreme, they can delegate their powers away. Separation of powers leads to or doesn't prevent concentration of powers, right? So dangerous, scary situation. What's the scary situation? The President of the United States. Oh no. Yes, go ahead. Do whatever you want, sir. Right? Like, I don't think so. I think that probably there should be a legal challenge to this, or somebody should stand up. John Rustad, this would be a good opportunity to be the opposition and say you can't do this and we're going to stop you. But TikTok, sir. TikTok. I haven't heard anything. Brett says, after being mocked on Fox News by U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick, Doug Ford says he had a very positive meeting with him. It was very, very positive. He never gives any details about the meeting. I don't trust Ford, and I think he should be kept far away from the negotiation table. Yes, true. Here we go.
Premier, how do you take Commerce Secretary Lutnick at his word when he says something very different to his American audience when he appears on Fox News? Once again, he mocked Canada, he mocked you, he said that Donald Trump taught you a lesson, and that's why you backed down. How do you deal with that type of tone when it's coming from the U.S.?
Well, I can't comment on Secretary Lutnick, what he says. All I know, first time we had an opportunity to sit right across from the table from him, look him square in the eyes, and had a great conversation. It was very positive. That's what I can tell you. It was very, very positive on both sides of the table there.
Premier.
He's thinking about buying some canola here. Tom Quiggin says Carney, Ford, and others want a trade war with the United States, which they believe will make Trump back down. This is false. The percentage of Canadian GDP dependent on export trade with the United States is 20 to 25%. The percentage of USA GDP export dependent on trade with Canada is approximately 1.7%, all based on 23-24 data. A ballpark figure says Canada could lose 25% of its GDP, which would put millions out of work. The USA could lose 1.7%, which is statistically minor. So you see, I hope you understand what that means. Like, if we get ripped on 25% of our economy, then we're kind of screwed. If the United States gets ripped on 1.7% of their economy, they can call up Huawei or any other China. Probably not Huawei. They could call up Japan. They could call up a whole bunch of different companies and say, listen, we need to replace the revenue that Canada brought in. So can you do us a solid and invest in the United States? I think they've already replaced our contribution with deals that Trump has inked in the last week, or in the last month anyway. Here is Trump on Canada. I've heard all of this before. I believe this was posted yesterday. The first time that this video is online, it was yesterday posted by Rapid Response. So I think this is new. It's 2 full minutes of Trump talking about Canada, and he ends with, they can keep Canada for their beautiful 51st state, which is funny, but not helpful, right? Like, I'm looking for stability. If I run a business that has anything at all to do with the border, right now is the most difficult and unstable time to run a business, and you almost want to get out of it, right? Or just move your business to the United States. You've won, sir, right? But then, like, that's not great for Canada. And if you like Canada, et cetera, as a business owner, you may want to stay and support the country. This makes it difficult. And so I'm looking for stability. Doug Ford got a meeting with Lutnick yesterday after enacting electricity tariffs, counter tariffs against Trump, and then removing them hours later. But this is after all that. Like, this is, as far as I understand it, yesterday. And Trump is not moved by any of this. He's like, yeah, this is going to happen. Sorry, it has to happen. It's going to be bumpy, but it has to happen. He says that. That's in the second half of this, and it's only 2 minutes. So here we go.
Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. Now, I'm not going to bend at all on aluminum or steel or cars. We're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. I have many friends in Canada. The great one, Wayne Gretzky, the great. Hey, how good is Wayne Gretzky? He's the great one. But we have, I know many people from Canada that are good friends of mine. But, you know, the United States can't subsidize a country for $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need anything that they give. We do it because we want to be helpful, but it comes a point when you just can't do that. You have to run your own country. And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. Just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states. Maybe our greatest state. But why should we subsidize another country for $200 billion? It costs us $200 billion a year. And again, we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry. We have to do this. Yes.
They need us. We don't need them. We have to do this. Oh, as a Canadian business owner, like, I want stability. He says it won't be long, but man, up to this point, okay, is this the goal? Is this what we're going for? It's the uncertainty that's killing things. It's the uncertainty that's problematic for most people. And I mean, he may be certain, Trump may be certain, but the communication to people on the ground, rank and file Canadian businesses who may support Trump, who may say, listen, like, this can't stand. The things that are happening can't stand. You can't have the waste that's happening in the United States. But then if you agree with you can't have the waste that's happening in the United States, or you can't have the waste that's happening in Canada, then you would agree that Trump would be right to cut off aid to foreign countries. And then you're at the conclusion of, we're a foreign country. Oh no. Right? So if you agree with him on that, then obviously, then you're not upset. I'm not upset that he's doing what he's doing because I think he's wrong. I'm upset because he's injecting instability to the business. If he had a bridge, like a bridge loan, you want to buy one house and you have to own another house during the time. So you have to get a bridge loan while the one house transitions owners and things like that. We need some kind of bridging stability between what's happening now and where we're going, because if not, it's going to destroy a whole bunch of people's wealth. And people aren't going to get on board with that. People are not going to support that. You can't support a game that destroys you in the pursuit of some higher goal. Like, it's climate change, carbon taxes, climate change. I don't mind destroying my entire life just so that 100 years from now, my kids will be able to have, sunlight or something like that. It's all nonsense. It's all bullshit. But you can't be asked to destroy your way of life in pursuit of some other person's benefit years down the road. We need to be onboarded, and we need to have stability. And if they can't provide that, then people are not going to support this, regardless of whether you like Trump and agree with the initial premise of what he's saying, right? I like Trump. I think that he's right about a lot of what he's saying. I think that Canada should do a lot of what they're doing in the United States. But then there's the question of, what about all the other countries we support, right? Like, what about the country, Canada, that the United States supports to the tune of $200 billion? What happens with us. And I'm saying we need stability. And without it, we're going to get screwed. And I talk about this often as well. Like, if you come in and say, listen, we're not going to, hey, listen, you businesses, the new government is no longer going to subsidize wages for anybody because we think wage subsidies are terrible. Now you've just doubled the payroll for a whole bunch of businesses. You can't do that to people because they're just people who are responding to government incentives, right? And so you can't do that to them. What you have to do is say, listen, we are going to wind down these incentives over the next 6 months. For the first month, the incentive that was 45% of the salary goes to 35. Second month, 25. Third month, 15, fourth month, 10. While this is happening, a subsidy that is exactly the same for hiring Canadian workers is being introduced to encourage Canadian workers born here or whatever it is, but non-foreign workers, non-temporary workers, Canadian workers, same subsidy. So the businesses can keep the subsidy longer if they hire Canadian workers, and then that subsidy gets turned off over a period of time. And then within 2 years, you've got a normalized situation with businesses who are able to handle their payroll because it's been slowly worked up back to what it should be, which is they pay 100% payroll unless you're doing some kind of subsidy program for whatever reason, because you want to incentivize something. But again, we shouldn't have affirmative action because it hurts everybody. It should be meritocracy. Meritocracy means best person for the job gets it. Okay. Fundamentally, so where do you stand? Do you think that Doge is good? Do you think that countries should look after their own first? And if you think that, what do you think about what Trump is doing? I think we need a bridge. I think we need some stability, for crying out loud. But that's my only criticism. Darn it. Here's Lutnick, and he's talking about this whole trade discussion. And in the first 30 seconds, he talks about how the Liberals are using this whole instability to garner votes. They're saying only we can bring stability. Only we can stand up to Trump and return things to how they were. And that, listening to Trump, if you believe what he said yesterday of we have to do this, it's going to be bumpy, but we have to do this. We have to do this. We can't get out of it. Then there is no returning to the status quo. We are in transition now. We are in a fall, and I hope we don't land too hard. Right? Here's Lutnick.
You have some countries that actually thoughtfully examine how they do business with us. And then you have people like the Canadians who are in elections. So you have no idea. You think it's about a trade war. This is their way of getting election votes.
Just take a step back and set the table. What are the stakes for today's meeting between you and Canadian officials?
Well, I think the stakes today, if you take a look at it from the big picture, is the United States said we need to have steel and aluminum domestically in America. In national security, you need metals to make bullets, you need metals to make munitions, you need metals to make everything. And Donald Trump is very focused on, let's make sure the key ingredients that are necessary to defend America are made here in America. And these other countries, they just don't pay attention. I mean, how many times do I have to say national security is important? And if you do like the EU and you respond by putting a tariff on Kentucky bourbon, which used to piss off Mitch McConnell, which doesn't really matter anymore, you got to wonder, really, do I have to deal with this stuff? But alas, we do.
Right? So Canada's using this to bolster their election prospects, and it's not about a trade war for them, it's actually about votes. And so that's interesting as well. Here is Senator Patrick Brazeau, and he's put this together. This is one of those situations, again, it feels like a longer video than it actually is, which is interesting. But here is Patrick Brazeau. Just to remind you, before we show the video, Brazeau is a senator, and he had a bunch of different scandals. So Patrick Brazeau is a Canadian senator from Quebec. He's been involved in several scandals through his political career. In 2013, he was expelled from the Conservative caucus following his arrest for domestic assault and sexual assault charges. He pled guilty to simple assault and cocaine possession in 2015 and was acquitted of sexual assault due to insignificant evidence. Additionally, Brazeau faced fraud and breach of trust charges related to his Senate expense claims, which were eventually dropped by the Crown in 2016. Brazeau has also been criticized for his poor attendance record in the Senate, where he was absent for 25% of the Senate sittings between 2011 and April 2012. He further faced public backlash for aggressive behavior, including an attack on journalist Jennifer D via his official Twitter account. There are allegations of sexual assault and heavy drinking during business hours, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the guy who is taking Donald Trump to task and saying, fight hard for Canada. Okay, this is Brazeau. Okay, here he is.
This is the Parliament of Canada. It's situated on Algonquin land.
Sorry, just to give you an idea, there's the camera is fixated on Brazeau doing push-ups in front of, I think there's like a fire there, and then the Parliament building behind him. And so he's doing the voiceover. But he's doing these very frantic kind of push-ups. It's really, it's something else.
The land of my ancestors. Recently, your father, Donald Trump, talked about annexation and for Canada to become the 51st state. Well, not on my watch. The president has started this unnecessary and dangerous tariffs war between our two countries. As a result, I'm challenging you, Don Jr., to a charity boxing match to raise money for cancer research. The U.S. is after Canada's oil, freshwater, minerals, resources, and our Arctic. Just like Russia's after Ukraine, China's after Taiwan, so it's not inconceivable that in order for the U.S. to keep up with the Joneses, that they are after Canada. Your father famously said, fight, fight, fight. I'm ready to fight for my country. Are you?
Charity boxing matches and all the rest. I don't know. I don't know about all that. I think that that's probably a very ineffective way of fighting a tariff war. Food professor is talking about eggs, and he says Canada is on track to export a record number of eggs to the United States to help alleviate skyrocketing egg prices. While this is the right thing to do from a humanitarian perspective, it will inadvertently benefit Donald Trump politically, which could make some Canadians uneasy. Weird. Like, it's so weird to have that framing everywhere. Like, how dare we alleviate the high cost of eggs with our excess capacity and laying chickens, right? Like, what? Just because you're ideologically opposed to the leader of another country, and been brainwashed to be so? Because I don't think most people would be ideologically opposed if they actually listened to what Donald Trump is saying most of the time. Bad Ombre says, egg prices continue to plummet. The silence from Harry Sissons, Jojo from Jers, Brooklyn, Crackhead Dad, and the K guys is deafening. And so it's very interesting because they were using the egg prices as an attack against Donald Trump to say, hey, Donald Trump, you're terrible and you're a bad leader and so on and so forth. And like, it's pretty much bullshit. It's a lot of bullshit. Sorry, everybody on the stream. I've got to cut it off right now because we're going to the paid show. So see you later. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you tomorrow. For everybody. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful